What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and today we're going to go on a little bit of a rant today. But if you're new to the podcast, you'll know that we have rants, which is kind of more discussion, hot topics, maybe even calling out some BS in the industry. We do have a lot of full-length interviews almost weekly where we talk with experts, athletes, and coaches on how they help guys get in the zone, whatever they specialize in. Also, those mental minutes, so there's quick mental game hacks to help elevate your performance. And then those deep dive educational explorations into small intricacies of skill acquisition or things that help you be in the zone. And I guess today it is a rant, but it also can be classified as a deep dive because we are going to talk a little bit on the nutrition side of things. And again, a lot of people overlook this. They just kind of see it as, oh, hey, yeah, like nutrition, make sure you eat plenty of food, you're not starving yourself. But it actually has a very large proponent to help you actually get zoned in and locked in, be ready to rock and roll for your games, right? Obviously, like I mentioned before, is the energy piece. If you don't have the right fuel, you're not going to be able to sustain yourself throughout the game, throughout the week, throughout a long season, right? Whether that's college or professional or even, dare I say it, some of these showcase tournaments and seasons where they'll be going stretched out all through the year. But, that's just the reality of it. So you do have to prepare yourself. And I wanted to give some practical tips here because we all know that the nutrition side of things does play a major, major role, not only for performance, but also for guys, especially whenever you're younger, trying to build yourself up into being a much more elite level athlete, or even for just that mental focus, like I said, to help kind of clear out some of that brain fog and some things that I can help uh, just shed some light on, I guess, and maybe a few things that have been misconceived or misinformation out there through social media or former teammates, former coaches, right? We want to make sure that we're doing this the right way. And you've probably heard this old adage where you're like, "Oh, hey, you need to have carbs before a game or before a workout or maybe after the workout." And it is true, right? You have, some starchy carbs or maybe some other things that are a little bit more quicker. And this is where some guys can kind of get into trouble where they overdo it, right? They overdo the gummy worms or they overdo the sports drink. They overdo the Smucker's PB&Js, which I think are awesome to do pregame to have some quick glycogen restoration in your system. And those are like the almost kind of quick energy boost that you can get pre-game, pre-workout, pre-practice, whatever that might be. But again, you have to kind of take that into moderation as with anything, right? So you can't just go and hammer that all day and expect to play really well, right? And that kind of goes into certain other things where you do need to at least track or have an idea of what you're eating throughout the day. I'm a big guy on counting calories because there is life that happens, right? We've all been there, especially as coaches. We know, hey, like this is what the team's going to get. May not be the best nutrition for every single post-game meal unless you're in a big Power Five where you have, you know, unlimited amount of resources to be able to get any type of food that you want. But even in those D1 schools, you have the pizzas or, the Jimmy John sandwiches, things like that, that are good, but they're not great. They're going to help get some of that fuel in for guys, but you do have to take into account as an individual, right, coach or player, okay, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I'm taking in. I know I can't really control this, but let's say you're tracking your food. You did everything you did for lunch, right? You prepped before you went out for the game for the evening, and oh, hey, I only have X amount of protein and carbs and fats left. And we'll just use a Jimmy John sandwich tray, for example, or those little boxes you get. You have the cookie, you have the chips, and you have the sandwich. And if you're limited on what you have access to, maybe there's an extra sandwich in there and you're trying to pack in the protein, but you don't need as many carbs. This is where you could kind of switch things out. And it's some things that I used as a player and a coach where I would take the meat and eat one whole sandwich. And if there was any extras left, I would just take the protein or, basically all the garnishes or the lettuce, cheese, all that good stuff, I'll put that on the other one to kind of help with more protein. And I would either give the cookie away so it kind of gets that temptation out of there, or the bread wouldn't eat that at all, or maybe sometimes the chips, right? So some of that can be fluctuated if that's where you're going over, or if you're not eating enough. Obviously, eating that entire tray is huge. Keep pounding it, get as much food as you can, especially if you're one of those starter guys who just are running all over the place. You're burning calories left and right. I don't think that's that big of a deal, but again, don't do it all the time. Another one, really just more for general health and wellness for everyone, I think, is hydration. And especially whenever you're playing in cold games, or even when you're playing in games that may not be as hot, you won't really tell that you're getting dehydrated. But as we're kind of transitioning into that spring, summer, it is very important that you guys get hydration. Now, I say this with a little bit of word of caution here. There is such thing as too much water. And I'll lead off with a story with this one. So obviously I was talking about summer baseball, and this was, I think, probably my sophomore year, going into my sophomore year of high school. And I was playing heat of the summer, middle of nowhere, Jonesboro, Arkansas, near Arkansas State, if any of you guys know where that is. And I was playing a full game, playing in the outfield, doing our thing. We ended up having to play 3 games in one day because we just kept rolling. So before we were gearing up for that second game, I start throwing some BP pregame just to get some of the bats rolling, and all of a sudden I feel my left calf cramp up. And I'm like, oh, okay, stretch it out, little Charlie horse, kind of get that little lunge stretch for the calf in. And then all of a sudden the next one starts to jolt on me. I'm like, oh man, here we go. So I can start to feel it again. I'm like, all right, hey, someone else come throw. I got to stretch myself out, just cramping up a little bit, needed some pickle juice or something. And I always carried around this big gallon of water, always crushed it. Probably went through it at least 1.5 of those gallons whenever I was playing over the summer. And with 3 games, you're going to go through that pretty easily with as much humidity and sweat there is in that East Arkansas area. For those of you who've been there, it's kind of a lot like Texas. So, 105-degree heat temperature, and I'm starting to cramp up, starting to stretch it out, and all of a sudden, left calf again, then right hamstring, then left hamstring, and all of a sudden my back starts spasming. I'm like, oh my goodness! So I literally had to lay on the ground like a starfish to keep myself from just over cramping. And a lot of people thought I was overreacting. I was like, no, this is really, really bad. Turns out I was pretty borderline, so almost having, that dehydration heat stroke in there. So I didn't go to the hospital, didn't get IV, but I did get salt tablets. And I think that's a huge hack for guys, or even just any type of electrolytes. So when I say hydration, with all that being said, right, that's more of, yes, water is part of it, but you need to replace the electrolytes, the salt, and everything that's coming out. A huge thing that I'm a huge fan of is Pedialyte, whether it's the drink. They also have these ice pops that you can get too, so you can kind of feel like you're getting a little bit of sugary snack with it if you have a sweet tooth like myself. You can really get those in really easily by doing that. Obviously, you have all those liquid IV powder drinks, or the prime, powders that you can put in the water. Those, again, aren't the worst thing, but there is a lot of added sugars within those, so you have to be careful with that too. And of course, when you're eating on the road, you're going on all these trips, or you're going away on travel, bring snacks, right? Bring something that will keep you from going to the grocery store and overbuying things, or keep you from eating like crap after the game or even before the game. And I definitely recommend not eating a whole lot of sugar for breakfast. And there's a lot of research that backs this up too. But you want to have a more heavy protein packed breakfast, and then you can basically push those heavy carbs, or the sweeter things that you all like to eat, and I'm talking to myself here too, but you can push that towards closer to the game, or closer towards after the game, to help refuel that glycogen storage, help get things rolling through. But one thing I did kind of allude over that is a huge game changer, not only for me now, but also whenever I was playing. And again, you can't do this all the time, but having some type of meal prep around definitely helps out a ton. I'm a big fan of things like factor meals, or maybe even some of those other pre-made meals, or you just hammer it out one Sunday where you have all of your lunches made ahead of time. And again, I've made some mistakes here, so make sure that you guys don't do things like rotisserie, or like the rotisserie chicken, or even tuna fish. Reheating those doesn't make you the best like teammate, or even coach inside the locker room or office whenever you have to heat all of that up, because those do smell. So obviously, just a standard chicken. Ground beef is also a really great one for any of those things that you have to reheat or heat up. Um, and chicken salad, or I did say steer away from tuna, but chicken salad doesn't tend to have as much of a smell, but really, really good and packed with protein that you can get just about any time of the day. Pair that with some pretzels or chips, whatever you want to have with that. Those are really, really solid. Um, and it also helps you kind of manage some cravings too. The more protein you get, keeps you away from wanting those sugary snacks, or, feeling these little bitty cravings here and there. And again, talking to myself, right? Um, but with this being said, this is something that, again, everyone talks about it, but you have to be about it. You got to put in the work. You have to run the play. You have to make sure that you're doing these things every single day to add up to where you're going to be able to perform, right? And really, some of this nutrition isn't just the day of. Sometimes it's 48 hours, 72 hours before, that's actually going to affect how you're performing and how your body is really working, and why it's actually being more optimal within the confines of the food that you give it. If it's in a survival mode where you're starving and basically fasting all throughout the day through class or whatever, and you're not eating, and all of a sudden you eat at the very last end of the day after you're done playing, you're going to pack on some fat mass. You're going to be in a really bad place as far as you're putting yourself in a calorie deficit, or just calorically you're not healthy. And that's where a lot of guys have to go through refeed diets, or even just really cutting back on a lot of things, and it can cause a lot of health issues later on. But overall, those things will be something that I would try to implement, or hopefully some of these tips helped you, maybe give you some ideas to help you keep that nutrition locked in and staying in the zone as much as that as you can, because that does play a major factor in that. And lastly, I'll leave out with this last one, and I'm sure everyone kind of knows this, especially for the younger kids: alcohol, right? Under 18, you shouldn't be, or really under 21, you shouldn't be drinking this at all, right? But for those of you who are old enough, that are around that, or even some of those pro guys, that it's very prominent around, the pro ball industry, where it's always in the locker rooms, always available. And I get it. Sometimes you need something to kind of settle you down after you just finish closing out the game at 10 p.m. You're, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, you're ready to rock and roll. But those things can really hinder your performance and help, and it doesn't help you get locked in or in the zone. It creates a lot of brain fog, a lot of sluggishness. Obviously, the next day, if you have too much, you have hangovers to deal with, right? So again, I'm sure this is all stuff that you guys know or have heard before, but again, it's just something that I had to reiterate to help you know, hey, this is also a big edge in season. May not always be the reps or the extra work that you're putting in practice, or how you're preparing yourself in the game. Sometimes it can just be as simple as what you're fueling your body with, right? But hope you guys got something out of this. If you did, please share it and stay in the zone.